Robin Williams leaned down and whispered something into Johnny Carson's ear on the last night of the most celebrated talk show in television history. And Johnny Carson, the man who had spent 30 years training himself never to flinch, never to buckle, never to let the mask slip even for a single second in front of the cameras, closed his eyes. The audience of 300 people inside Studio One at NBC Burbank could feel something passing between the two men that no microphone could capture. Something private, something that had been building for 15 years and had finally run out of time to stay hidden. What Robin Williams said in those seconds has never been publicly repeated. Not by Robin, not by Johnny, not by anyone who was in that room. But the people who were there said afterward that what they witnessed was the most honest thing they had ever seen on that stage. More honest than any scripted tearful confession. More honest than any planned tribute. Because it was never supposed to happen at all. May 21st, 1992. The final taping of The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. And Robin Williams, dressed in that black jacket with its bright yellow and green accents, carrying a white electric guitar he had not told anyone about, was about to give something back to the man who had given him everything. But why that night? Why those words? And what could possibly make the king of late-night television close his eyes like a man who has just been handed something he thought he would never see again? Stay with me. Because what happened in that studio on the evening of May 21st, 1992 will change the way you understand what it means to be seen by someone who matters. If this story is already pulling at something inside you, hit that like button right now and tell me in the comments where in the world you are watching from tonight. This one is worth being part of. To understand what Robin Williams brought into that studio on Johnny Carson's final night, you have to go back 15 years. Back to the spring of 1977. When a 25-year-old comedian with shaggy blonde hair and a mind that moved faster than anyone in the room could follow was sitting in a green room at NBC Burbank wondering if he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Robin Williams was not famous yet. He had been doing stand-up in small clubs around San Francisco and Los Angeles for 3 years, and the rooms that loved him fiercely. But they were small rooms. He had a way of performing that nobody had quite seen before. A chaotic, volcanic, free-associating electricity that left audiences simultaneously laughing and slightly afraid. Club owners adored him and were quietly terrified of him in equal measure. He was, in the language of the industry, unbookable on television. Too unpredictable, too fast, too much. And then a cancellation changed everything. A Tonight Show guest dropped out at the last minute on a Wednesday afternoon in late April of 1977.
Before we continue our video, I'd like to say something. I often see comments from people who didn't realize they weren't subscribed. If you enjoy the channel, please take a second to check and make sure you're subscribed. It's free, and it really helps us keep the show growing. Thank you for being part of this journey with us.
The producer, desperate to fill the slot, made a call. Someone had mentioned Robin Williams. Someone else said he was absolutely not ready for national television. A third person said that was exactly why they should book him. Johnny Carson, who had a gift for sensing combustion before it ignited, said quietly, "Let him come in." Robin Williams did not sleep the night before. He sat in a room in a cheap hotel on Cahuenga Boulevard and paced until 3 in the morning, running through bits he then abandoned, running through the idea of calling his agent and saying he was sick, which he also abandoned. He was not sick. He was terrified. There is a difference, and Robin Williams always knew the difference. What nobody has ever told the full story about is what happened in the 30 minutes before Robin walked out onto that stage. Because something happened in the corridor outside Johnny Carson's dressing room that Robin never spoke about publicly. Not in interviews, not in any of the hundreds of profiles written about him over the decades that followed. He kept it close, the way people keep the things that matter most. Folded up, private, carried quietly for 15 years. And what happened next is the reason Robin Williams drove to NBC Burbank on the evening of May 21st, 1992, with a white electric guitar in the back of his car and something burning in his chest that had been building for a very long time. The backstage atmosphere at NBC Burbank on that final evening was unlike anything the crew had experienced. And these were people who had experienced quite a lot. 30 years of The Tonight Show had passed through those corridors. Every president, every legend, every heartbreak and triumph that American popular culture had produced since 1962 had walked those hallways at some point. But the feeling on May 21st was something the walls could not absorb. It was something that lived in the people. Gary Sherwin had worked as a floor manager at The Tonight Show for 11 years. He had watched the most famous people in the world walk past him without blinking. But on the afternoon of May 21st, he had to step outside into the parking lot for 10 minutes just to breathe, because the weight of the evening was already pressing against the walls before a single guest had arrived. Johnny Carson had asked to be left alone in his dressing room from 3 o'clock onward. His producer respected that. Everyone respected that. Ed McMahon arrived at 2:30 and sat in the commissary drinking coffee he did not touch. Doc Severinsen spent 45 minutes in the band room running through scales with no particular urgency, the way a person does when their hands need something to do while their mind goes somewhere else entirely. And Robin Williams arrived at 4:15 in the afternoon, 2.5 hours early. He was wearing the black jacket with the yellow and green accents. His hair was the same wild blonde tangle it had always been. He carried the white electric guitar in a soft case over one shoulder. He had not told the producers he was bringing it. The stage manager who signed him in at the security desk glanced at the guitar case and started to ask about it, and Robin said, very quietly, "It is for Johnny," and the stage manager wrote nothing on the intake sheet. Robin went to the green room and sat in one of the leather chairs with the guitar case beside him and turned his wedding ring over and over on his finger, which was something he did when he was working through something he could not yet put into words. He was thinking about a corridor he had stood in 15 years ago, and a conversation that had been the foundation under everything that came after. And what you have not seen yet is what Johnny said that day that Robin could only now give back. Subscribe right now if you are not already. Drop your location in the comments and stay with me, because what happened in that corridor in 1977 is the key to everything that happened on this stage in 1992. April 1977. Robin Williams was 25 years old and standing in the corridor outside Johnny Carson's dressing room approximately 40 minutes before his first national television appearance, and he was not going to be able to do it. This was not a feeling, it was a certainty. He had performed scared before, everyone did, but this was a different kind. The kind that does not sharpen you, the kind that takes your legs from you and tells you, very calmly, that you are about to embarrass yourself in front of more people than have ever seen you do anything in your entire life, and that you will not recover from it. He was leaning against the corridor wall with his eyes closed when he heard the dressing room door open. Johnny Carson was 62 at the time. He had been hosting The Tonight Show for 15 years. He was arguably the most recognizable face on American television. He was also a man who noticed things, small things, the kind that most people with that amount of fame and power had long since stopped having the bandwidth to notice. He noticed when the lighting guys were tired. He noticed when Ed was carrying something on a particular evening. He noticed the energy in a corridor when he stepped out of his dressing room on the way to the stage. He noticed a 25-year-old with his hands pressed flat against the painted cinder block like he needed to feel something solid. Johnny stopped. He did not say anything immediately. Then Robin opened his eyes, and for a second neither of them spoke. Then Johnny Carson, who had no particular obligation to stop, who had a show to prepare for and 30 other things demanding his attention, said something that Robin Williams would carry for the next 15 years in the place where people carry the things that change them. He said quietly, "I know exactly what you are feeling right now. I felt it every single night for the first 3 years. You think you are about to be found out. You think the whole country is going to look at you at the same moment and realize you are not what they thought you were. And then the lights come up, and you start, and you find out it is not the country you have to worry about. It is just the next sentence, just one sentence at a time. That is all this job ever is." He paused. Then he said, "You are going to be more than fine. I have a feeling about you." And then he walked toward the stage. Robin Williams stood in that corridor for 10 more seconds. Then he walked out onto The Tonight Show for the first time in his life. And he was extraordinary. The audience laughed so hard at one point that Johnny had to wait 30 seconds for the room to quiet enough to continue. At the end of the segment, Johnny leaned back in his chair and said, with genuine wonder, That is the funniest human being I have encountered in 20 years of doing this." The switchboard lit up within minutes of the broadcast. Robin Williams left the building that night a different person than the one who had arrived. But the moment those words from the corridor saved him was not in the studio that April evening. It was somewhere else entirely, in a darkness that came years later, in a season of his life when the man who could make any room on earth erupt in joy could not find a single real thing inside himself to hold on to. Success at a speed nobody was designed for had cost things that did not announce their departure until they were gone. There were periods Robin spoke about only obliquely in interviews, and periods he did not speak about at all. A particular night, he would tell Johnny Carson 15 years later, when he had sat alone for the first time in what felt like years without any audience, without any camera, without any obligation to be extraordinary, and could not find anything solid underneath it all. And the thing that had come to him in that quiet was what a man in a corridor had said in 30 seconds. Just the next sentence. Just one sentence at a time. That is all this job ever is. He had found the floor. He had made the next sentence, and he had never told anyone. But what you have not seen yet is what Robin whispered into Johnny's ear that made the king of late night close his eyes on his final night on Earth. The taping of Johnny Carson's final Tonight Show began at 5:30 in the evening, as it had begun at 5:30 on every other evening for nearly 3 decades. Doc Severinsen raised his baton. The theme played. Ed McMahon's voice filled the studio, and Johnny Carson walked through that curtain for the last time. The audience of 300 people rose before he had taken a single step. The sound that came out of them was not applause in the way that word normally means something. It was closer to something involuntary, the kind of sound a crowd makes when the thing happening in front of them is too large to respond to with a trained reflex. Johnny was wearing a tan suit jacket, white shirt, dark tie. His silver hair was perfect. His posture was what it had always been, straight, still, containing everything. But his eyes, in those first few seconds, were doing something that the cameras caught and that millions of people watching the broadcast later that night would feel without being able to name. He was looking at the room the way you look at a place you have loved for 30 years and are seeing for the last time. He smiled. He walked to his desk. He sat down, and the show began. The monologue was warm and funny and self-aware in the way Johnny had always managed. He made jokes about retirement, he said, with the timing that had made him the standard for 30 years, that after 3 decades of asking other people the questions, he had finally run out of interesting answers about himself, which got the biggest laugh of the opening. The audience laughed, the way people laugh when something is true, and also slightly unbearable. When Ed McMahon announced Robin Williams' name, the audience responded with something wilder, louder, more relieved somehow, as though Robin's presence gave them permission to feel something they had been trying to organize into grief and did not know what to do with. Robin came through the curtain fast, that kinetic forward momentum that suggested his body was always slightly trying to keep up with his mind. The black jacket with its yellow and green accents, the blonde hair, wild and uncurated, exactly as it had always been. He was carrying nothing. The guitar was still in the green room. Johnny stood up. Robin came around the desk, and they embraced. And the audience, watching 2 men who had known each other for 15 years hold on for 3 or 4 seconds longer than a television embrace normally lasts, understood that what they were watching was not performance. Both men had something in their eyes when the embrace broke. Robin sat down in the guest chair to Johnny's right and looked at him the way you look at someone you have been thinking about for a long time. For the first several minutes, Robin Williams did what Robin Williams always did on a talk show, which was to make it almost impossible for the host to get a word in. He did voices, he did impressions, he did a bit about turning 60-something that had Johnny leaning back with his hand over his eyes, shoulders shaking. The audience was delirious. For a few minutes, the sadness in the room lifted completely, the way it sometimes does in the presence of someone who has an absolute genius for joy. But what you have not seen yet is what was happening underneath all of it. What Robin Williams was actually carrying through every joke and every impression. He was waiting. He was carrying something and waiting for the right moment to put it down. And the right moment was not going to announce itself. He was going to have to make it. Do not go anywhere. because what Robin does next is something nobody in that studio expected, and it will leave you completely speechless. The shift happened about 14 minutes into the segment, not from a plan, but from a silence. Johnny asked what Robin remembered about the early days, about coming up, about those first years before anyone knew his name. Robin started into something funny about a comedy club in San Francisco where the microphone had been duct taped to a broom handle that then collapsed halfway through his set. The audience laughed. Johnny laughed, and then Robin stopped. He stopped the way a person stops when something true is pushing against the funny thing, and the true thing is going to win. He looked at Johnny, not at the camera, not at the audience, at Johnny. And his voice, when it came, was quieter than any voice that room had heard from Robin Williams in 15 years of appearances. "You know," he said, "I have been trying to figure out for about a week how to say something to you. I have not been able to figure it out. So I am just going to say it and let it be imperfect, because I think you deserve imperfect honesty more than you deserve perfect performance. And this is the last chance I am going to get." The room felt it. That immediate, total shift in atmosphere that a studio audience makes when they understand they are no longer watching a show but witnessing something. 300 people went still. Johnny Carson did not reach for a quip. He just looked at Robin Williams with something open in his face and said, very simply, "Go ahead." Robin looked down at his hands for a moment, then back up. His voice was steady, but it was the steadiness of someone choosing it deliberately, the way a person walks carefully on uncertain ground. "Do you remember 1977? April, I think. My first appearance here. You came out of your dressing room before the taping, and I was standing in the corridor, and I looked like I was having a medical event, which I basically was. You stopped. You said something to me. I have never told anyone exactly what you said, because I was keeping it close. I know you probably do not remember it. It was 30 seconds in a hallway. But I need to tell you what happened the next time those words reached me, because it was not that night in the studio. It was years later, in a room alone. In the worst night of a period I am not going to describe in detail, except to say that underneath everything I had built and everything I was supposed to be, I could not find anything solid. And what came to me in that silence was what you said in that corridor. Just the next sentence. Just one sentence at a time. Robin's voice had dropped to something barely carrying across the distance between the guest chair and the desk. "I found the floor," he said. "I made the next sentence, and then the one after that. I am sitting here tonight because of 30 seconds in a hallway that you have probably not thought about again in your life, and I could not let this be the last night without you knowing that." The studio was completely silent. Johnny Carson's jaw was tight. His hand was flat on the desk in front of him, perfectly still. For a moment he did not speak at all. Then he said, slowly, that he did remember the corridor. He said he had not remembered it in years, but he remembered it now. The young man with the blonde hair standing against the wall. The feeling of recognizing something in that fear, because it was a fear he knew from the inside. He said what he had told Robin was not wisdom. It was just the thing he had told himself in order to get through his own first years without coming apart. One sentence at a time. He had been giving Robin something he had made for himself, and it turned out the young man in the hallway had needed it too. His voice was not steady. "It will never stop mattering to me," he said, "that it helped you." The audience made a sound that was not quite applause and not quite crying, but was something between the two, something involuntary and collective and very human. Robin stood up. He went to the edge of the stage and called back to the green room. A stagehand appeared with the white electric guitar in its soft case. Robin took it out. It was a pale, clean instrument, the body cream white, the hardware simple, nothing ostentatious about it. He brought it to the desk and set it carefully in front of Johnny Carson. He said, "I have played guitar my whole life. Most people do not know that. I bought this one years ago, and I have played it at every moment that mattered to me privately. The ones nobody saw, the ones that were just mine." He put his hand on the neck of the guitar, then lifted it away. "I want you to have it. Not as a prop, not as a television moment. Because when I play, the thing that comes back is what you told me. Just the next note, just one note at a time. And I want you to have that with you wherever you go from here." Johnny Carson looked at the guitar on his desk. He looked at it for a moment, that stretched past anything the format of a talk show was designed to accommodate, and nobody moved to fill the space. Then he reached forward and put his hand on the body of the guitar, the way you put your hand on something you want to make sure is real, and he pressed his lips together, and he closed his eyes. That was the moment. That was what the audience of 300 people saw. That was what the cameras caught. Johnny Carson with his eyes closed and his hand on a white guitar, and Robin Williams leaning toward him from the guest chair, and the whole studio holding its breath around them like it was trying to protect something fragile. When Johnny opened his eyes, he did not try to speak immediately. He just looked at Robin Williams for a long moment, with an expression that 30 years of television presence had never once produced, completely unguarded, the way a person looks when something they have carried for a long time has just been named correctly for the first time. And then he said, very quietly, "Thank you." Just those 2 words. But the way he said them carried everything that the evening had been building toward since the taping began. Everything that 30 years of showing up and finding the next sentence had been building toward. "Thank you." Robin nodded. He did not say "you are welcome." He sat back in his chair, and for a moment both men existed in the same space without performance, without the machinery of being famous together. Just 2 people with something between them that had mattered. If you have ever been given something by someone who did not know what they were giving you, and if you have ever had the chance to go back and tell them, you know exactly what that studio felt like in those minutes. And if you have never had that chance, then you know a different kind of thing. "Stay with me." The show continued. Bette Midler sang. Johnny delivered his final sign-off with the grace and contained feeling that was entirely his own. The curtain came down on 30 years, and the white guitar sat on the edge of the famous desk for the whole last hour, in the frame of every shot, present and quiet and completely itself. After the taping ended, Johnny stood for a long time beside his desk with his hand resting on the white guitar. His producer later said he had never seen Johnny look like that before in all the years of working together. Not tired, not sad exactly. Something more like a person who has arrived somewhere after a very long journey and is taking the time to actually feel the ground beneath them. Robin Williams had already slipped out through the back with the quiet of someone who understands that a moment has a shape and you do not crowd the end of it. But he had left something behind, something solid, something with strings. The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson aired its final broadcast that night at 11:30 Eastern Time. By midnight, every network news operation in the country was running tributes. The ratings were the highest the show had seen in years, though numbers felt beside the point. Something larger than ratings was ending. A voice that had been there every night before America went to sleep for 30 years was going quiet, and the country could feel the specific shape of the silence it was leaving. What most tribute packages only captured in glimpses was the 14 minutes with Robin Williams, the full shape of what had been said, the white guitar, the closed eyes, because some things that happen on a stage are too private for the stage to fully contain, and the cameras, with all their faithfulness, can only give you the outside of them. But the 300 audience members who had sat in their seats and held their breath talked about it for years afterward. A stagehand who had been working at NBC Burbank for 12 years said it was the only time in his career he had considered the possibility that his job was something sacred. Robin Williams worked for 13 more years after that evening. He never spoke in interviews about what he had said that night, or about the white guitar, or about the corridor in 1977. He kept it private, the way he had kept it private for 15 years. Some things you carry because they are yours. Some things you give away because the person who gave them to you needs to know what the giving meant. Johnny Carson spent the remaining years of his life in Malibu, largely away from the public eye he had occupied for so long. The white guitar reportedly sat in his living room for the rest of his life, where guests sometimes asked about it and were given some version of a true answer. He died on January 23, 2005. He was 79 years old. Robin Williams was one of the people who spoke about him publicly in the days that followed. He did not tell the story of the corridor. He did not tell the story of the guitar. He said simply that Johnny Carson was the person who had shown him that this work, the work of standing in front of people and trying to make them feel something real, was worth doing carefully, and that he had never forgotten it. Johnny Carson spent 30 years demonstrating that the next sentence is always possible, that the next note is always there. He said it in hallways, and he said it in the grammar of his own nightly presence, the reliability of it, the way he was there every single evening, ordinary and extraordinary in the same breath. Robin Williams understood that in a way that very few people did, because Robin had been in the corridor when the words were still small enough to be spoken plainly, before the legend settled over everything and made the plain things hard to say. There is a version of this story where what matters is the famous people, and the famous stage, and the famous ending of a famous show. That version is interesting. But the version that matters is smaller than that. It is a 25-year-old standing against a cinder block wall with his eyes closed, and an older man stepping out of his dressing room and choosing to stop. That is the whole story. Every 15 years of consequence that followed grew from that 30 seconds in a corridor, from a choice to notice, from a choice to say the true thing plainly, from just one sentence at a time. That is what Robin Williams brought back on the final night. Not a tribute, not a performance. Proof that the thing had been given and had landed and had mattered, returned to its source with both hands, on the last possible evening. You never know who is standing against the wall when you step out of your room. You never know whose next sentence you are holding in your mouth without realizing it. You never know who will carry what you said for 15 years and bring it back to you when you need to know that your life made a difference. But Johnny Carson found out. On the last night, at the last possible moment, in front of a white guitar with the studio lights going warm and the curtains still up, and 300 people holding their breath in the dark, he found out. If this story reached something inside you, subscribe to this channel right now. We tell stories about the moments when what is real breaks through what is performed, when the famous and the human turn out to be the same thing. Share this with someone who needs to hear that the things they say in corridors matter. The things they say in passing, without drama, without knowing anyone is keeping them, matter enormously. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from tonight. Tell me about something someone said to you briefly, without knowing what it meant, that you have carried ever since, because those are the stories that hold the world together. And this was one of them.